Silver Creek, Wyoming Territory, autumn 1887. When 24-year-old Emma Walsh stepped off the westbound train, clutching a marriage contract and a worn carpetbag, she found nothing but an empty platform and broken promises. Her intended groom had vanished without explanation, leaving her stranded 2,000 miles from home with nowhere to go. Then a quiet rancher named Cole Brennan approached, studied her abandoned state, and spoke words that would change everything. "You need a husband? You do now." What began as an act of mercy on a cold October afternoon would become a story of how the best marriages aren't planned. They're chosen in moments when courage matters more than contracts. Chapter 1. The Empty Platform. The train's whistle cut through Wyoming's autumn air like a blade through silk. October 12th, 1887, brought the kind of crystalline afternoon where everything appeared sharper than it should. The distant mountains, the weathered depot, the realization that Emma Walsh had made a catastrophic mistake. She stepped onto the wooden platform with careful precision, her carpetbag heavy in one hand and a leather portfolio containing her marriage contract in the other. The train hissed behind her, releasing steam that curled around her ankles. Other passengers dispersed quickly, claimed by waiting families or purposeful strides toward known destinations. Emma stood motionless, searching for a face that matched the daguerreotype she'd studied countless times during the 3-week journey westward. Thomas Whitmore was supposed to be there. The correspondence had been clear, his letters methodical in their detail. He would meet the afternoon train wearing a dark coat and holding autumn flowers. They would proceed directly to the preacher, then to his established homestead, where she would assume her duties as his wife. The platform emptied. No dark coat appeared. No flowers materiales. The station master, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained whiskers, emerged from the depot office and began hauling freight without acknowledging her presence. Emma's chest tightened with each passing moment. She approached the station master with manufactured confidence, inquiring about Thomas Whitmore's whereabouts. The man paused, spat tobacco juice into the dirt, and delivered his verdict with brutal indifference. Whitmore had left Silver Creek 3 weeks prior, headed to California with a widow from Denver. Hadn't mentioned any mail-order bride. Hadn't left messages or forwarding addresses. The words landed like physical blows. Emma's carefully constructed future crumbled into dust. She had sold everything in Philadelphia. Her mother's china, her father's watch, the tiny millinery shop she'd inherited after their deaths. The money had purchased train fare west and new dresses suitable for a rancher's wife. Now she possessed $17, 2 dresses, and absolutely nowhere to go. The autumn sun slanted lower, painting everything amber and gold. She sank onto a bench outside the depot, carpetbag at her feet, and tried to formulate any plan beyond sitting there until she froze or starved. The sound of approaching boots made her look up. A man moved across the platform with the easy gait of someone completely comfortable in his own body. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing work clothes that had seen honest labor, denim trousers, a chambray shirt, a leather vest scarred by use. His hat sat low, shadowing features that appeared carved rather than formed. He stopped a respectful distance away, removed his hat, and revealed a face perhaps 30 years old, weathered by wind and sun. Dark eyes assessed her situation with disconcerting accuracy. When he spoke, his voice carried the rough texture of someone who spent more time with horses than people. He'd overheard her conversation with the station master. He explained without preamble. Silver Creek was small enough that news traveled faster than good sense. His next words were delivered with matter-of-fact simplicity. She shouldn't stay on that platform after dark. Bad elements drifted through railroad towns, and a woman alone attracted the wrong kind of attention. Emma's spine stiffened with defensive pride. She explained her situation with forced dignity, the correspondence, the contract, the expectation of immediate marriage. She was perfectly capable of managing her circumstances, she insisted, though her trembling hands betrayed the lie. The stranger listened without interrupting. When she finished, he replaced his hat, considered the darkening sky, and made his proposal with the same straightforward tone one might use to discuss weather or livestock. She needed a husband. He needed a wife. The solution appeared obvious enough. Emma stared at him, certain she'd misheard. But his steady gaze held no deception, no mockery, no hidden cruelty. His name was Cole Brennan. He owned a horse ranch in the foothills, built solid and profitable through 10 years of relentless work. He'd been planning to find a wife eventually, but had simply been too busy to pursue the matter properly. Her arrival seemed like fate intervening. The proposal was insane. Emma had traveled 2,000 miles to marry a stranger, true, but that arrangement had involved months of correspondence. This man was offering marriage based on a 5-minute conversation. Every rational thought she possessed screamed warnings. But rationality had brought her to this exact moment. Stranded, abandoned, with darkness approaching and winter not far behind. She studied Cole Brennan's face, searching for signs of malice or madness, and found only a patient waiting. He wasn't pressuring her. He'd made his offer and would accept whatever decision she reached. She asked what he expected from a wife. His answer came with characteristic bluntness. Someone who wouldn't run when things got difficult, someone who could manage a household during his long days with the horses, someone honest enough to speak plain truths instead of sweet lies. He wasn't looking for romance or passion. He needed a partner capable of building something lasting. The sun touched the mountain peaks, flooding the platform with dying light. Finally, she stood, smoothed her traveling dress, and gave her answer with more confidence than she felt. If he was offering, she was accepting. Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile, but a subtle easing of tension. He picked up her carpetbag without being asked, gestured toward a sturdy wagon hitched nearby, and spoke the words that would echo through her memory for years. "You do now." They found the preacher before full darkness fell. The ceremony was brief, witnessed by the preacher's startled wife and a confused deputy. Emma Walsh became Emma Brennan in less time than it took to brew coffee, bound by legal words to a man whose past remained a mystery, whose future had just become irrevocably tangled with her own. As they drove toward the foothills, Emma noticed Cole hadn't bought her flowers or made romantic declarations. Instead, he placed a heavy blanket across her lap against the evening chill and asked if she was hungry. Practical considerations, not poetry. Somehow, that mattered more than bouquets ever could. Chapter 2. The Ranch and Its Ghosts. Dawn came slowly to the foothills, spreading pink and gold across peaks that seemed to touch heaven. Emma woke in a strange bed, in a strange house, beside a strange man who was now legally her husband. Cole's ranch sprawled across a valley where a creek ran year-round. The house stood solid and well-built. 2 stories, pine logs chinked tight against Wyoming winters, a stone chimney that spoke of someone who understood harsh weather. Outbuildings dotted the property, a large barn, corrals, a stable, and a smokehouse. Inside, the house revealed a man who lived alone and didn't particularly mind it. Furniture served a function rather than decoration. Everything was clean but sparse. No curtains framed the windows. No rugs warmed the floors. But one detail stopped Emma in her tracks. On the fireplace mantel sat a daguerreotype in a silver frame. A woman with gentle eyes smiled from behind the glass. Emma didn't need to ask who she was. Cole noticed her staring during breakfast. He explained without emotion that her name had been Catherine. They'd been married 6 years before influenza took her during a brutal winter 3 years past. He'd loved her completely, he stated plainly, and wouldn't pretend otherwise. But she was gone, and life continued. Emma absorbed this information while sipping coffee strong enough to strip paint. She was a replacement rather than a first choice. A practical solution to a practical problem. Catherine would always be the wife he'd chosen with his heart. Emma was simply the wife he'd chosen with his head. The thought should have stung worse than it did. Instead, Emma found odd comfort in the honesty. At least Cole wasn't pretending romantic feelings he didn't possess. The clarity, while brutal, was somehow cleaner than Thomas Whitmore's fraudulent letters. Cole's routine was established and inflexible. He rose before dawn, worked with his horses until midday, came inside briefly, then returned to work until darkness. He bred horses for endurance and temperament, selling to ranchers and cavalry outposts. Emma's role remained initially unclear. Cole never explicitly outlined her duties. He simply assumed she would manage the household while he managed the livestock. Emma, accustomed to running her own shop, found this vagueness both frustrating and liberating. She began addressing the house's stark functionality. She sewed curtains from muslin, braided rag rugs from worn clothing, and organized the kitchen with a shopkeeper's efficiency. Cole noticed these changes without commenting, though Emma caught him studying the curtains with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. The first real test came 2 weeks into their marriage when Cole's hired hand, Dutch, arrived for autumn horse breaking. Dutch took one look at Emma and unleashed a laugh that echoed across the valley. Married, was he? And here, Dutch thought Cole planned to die alone and stubborn like some old badger. Emma prepared hearty meals for both men, watching from the porch as they worked with young horses. Cole possessed a gift with animals, an understanding that allowed communication beyond words. The horses trusted him instinctively, but when he came inside each evening, that gift seemed to evaporate. Cole barely spoke, eating with mechanical efficiency before retreating to his ledgers or falling asleep by the fire. Emma, accustomed to her parents' warm household, found the silence oppressive. One night, after a particularly long silence, Emma asked the question that had been building. Why did he really marry her? Not the practical reasons, but why marry at all? He'd managed alone for 3 years. What changed? Cole's answer came slowly. Loneliness, he admitted, had weight to it. Not the obvious kind that made people desperate, but the subtle variety that accumulated like snow, barely noticeable until suddenly you couldn't open the door anymore. Catherine's death had created silence where sound used to be. He'd survived it, certainly, but surviving wasn't the same as living. The admission hung between them, more intimate than anything they'd shared. Emma understood that kind of loneliness. She'd felt it after her parents died, surrounded by people, but fundamentally alone. Something shifted that night. Not love, certainly. Not even friendship yet. But perhaps the beginning of understanding, a recognition that they were both people who'd learned to survive alone and might learn to survive together instead. Chapter 3. Learning the Language. Winter arrived early, bringing snow that transformed the valley into pristine white silence. Emma learned that isolation during summer was inconvenient, but isolation during winter became serious business. The ranch existed in its own world, cut off from Silver Creek by impassable roads. Cole prepared with thoroughness. He stocked the root cellar with enough supplies to feed 2 people through months of storms. He reinforced the barn, checked every chink, and brought the horses closer to the buildings. Emma discovered that being a rancher's wife demanded different skills than running a millinery shop. She learned to read the weather and the sky's color and the horse's behavior. She learned to make soap, render tallow, and preserve meat. She learned that coffee could be stretched with chicory, that bread could rise in a cabin warmed only by fireplace heat. But the most important thing Emma learned was how to read Cole Brennan. The man communicated through actions rather than words. Understanding that language required patience. She learned that Cole setting fresh firewood beside the stove before she woke meant he'd noticed her struggling with fires. His repairing the broken porch step without being asked meant he'd observed her nearly falling. His bringing her coffee while she worked meant he appreciated her efforts even if he never said so. Similarly, Emma developed her own vocabulary. Having hot meals ready when Cole came inside mattered more than fancy preparation. Keeping his work clothes clean and mended spoke louder than compliments ever could. Their first real argument came in December during a blizzard that trapped them inside for 5 days. The explosion came over something trivial, Emma rearranging his tools. Cole spoke sharply about not touching his equipment. Emma responded with equal sharpness about his stubborn refusal to improve anything. The argument escalated rapidly. Emma accused him of treating her like hired help rather than a wife. Cole countered that she was trying to remake his home. The words grew harsher until Emma grabbed her cloak and walked out into the snow. She made it to the barn before the wind drove her back. She sat in the barn's relative warmth, shaking with anger and cold and fear that she'd made another terrible mistake. Cole found her an hour later. He didn't apologize. Instead, he sat beside her and began talking about Catherine, how they'd argued too, how she'd been stubborn and fierce, how he'd loved that about her, how her death had taught him that silence was easier than conversation because silence couldn't hurt you when it ended. Emma listened, understanding finally what she was dealing with. Cole wasn't cold or cruel. He was terrified. Terrified of caring too much, of building something that could be destroyed again, of opening himself to pain he'd barely survived once. She spoke then about her own fears, about being abandoned by Whitmore, about feeling like she'd purchased her way into Cole's life, about her parents' deaths, leaving her alone in a world that didn't care about single women with no family. They sat in that barn while the wind howled outside, two damaged people admitting their damage to each other. When they returned to the house, nothing was magically fixed, but something had cracked open, a door that had been locked tight. That night, Cole did something unprecedented. Instead of retreating to his ledgers, he asked if she knew how to play checkers. They played 3 games before the fire, and Emma won 2. Cole accused her of cheating. She accused him of being a poor loser, and they both almost smiled. The winter continued, but inside the ranch house, warmth began building that had nothing to do with the fireplace. They started talking during meals. Cole told stories about horses he'd trained, about building the ranch. Emma shared memories of her parents, her shop, and her initial excitement about moving west. They learned each other's rhythms. Emma discovered that Cole appreciated quiet companionship more than conversation, that his silence wasn't rejection but contentment. Cole discovered that Emma needed purpose, that her improvements weren't criticisms but expressions of care. One evening in late January, Cole returned from checking horses to find Emma had moved Catherine's photograph from the mantel to a side table in the bedroom. He stopped, stared at the empty space, then looked at Emma. Instead of anger, Cole simply nodded. Catherine deserved remembering, he said quietly, but maybe not in a way that made a new wife feel like she was living in a shrine. Emma had earned her own space on that mantel through every meal cooked, every shirt mended, every moment she'd chosen to stay. The gesture was small, but its meaning was enormous. Emma wasn't replacing Catherine. She was becoming Emma Brennan in her own right, chosen through the daily decision to keep choosing each other. Chapter 4. The Choosing. Spring arrived late, but glorious, painting the valley in impossible colors. The snow retreated, revealing brown earth that would soon green. Cole's horses, restless after winter confinement, kicked and played like children released from schoolrooms. Emma stood on the porch watching the valley transform, marveling at how 6 months could change everything. The frightened woman who'd stepped off that train seemed like a stranger now. But spring brought unexpected complications. A letter arrived from Philadelphia. Her cousin Martha explained that Emma's shop had finally sold. After settling debts, $1,700 remained. The money was Emma's to claim if she returned to Philadelphia. $1,700 represented real independence. Emma could return east, establish a new shop, live comfortably without depending on anyone. The money offered escape from a marriage that had started as desperation rather than love. Emma kept the letter for 3 days before mentioning it to Cole. When she finally did, his expression revealed nothing. He asked if she planned to go. She admitted she didn't know. Cole set down his fork and spoke with careful precision. He wouldn't stop her, he said. Their marriage had been born from necessity, arranged in haste. If she wanted freedom, she'd earned it through 6 months of hard work. He'd even give her money for train fare. But, he continued, he hoped she'd stay. Not out of obligation, but because she chose to. Because somewhere between that train platform and this moment, they'd built something worth keeping. Emma listened to this speech and felt something crack open in her chest. He wasn't declaring love. He was simply stating fact. She mattered to him now, and her leaving would hurt. She asked what he would do if she left. Cole's answer came quietly. He'd survive, same as he'd survived Catherine's death. But surviving wasn't living, and he'd started living again these past months. Started looking forward to coming inside for supper. started noticing how the house felt wrong when she visited Silver Creek without him. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and honest. Emma thought about Philadelphia, the familiar streets, rebuilding her old life. Then she thought about the ranch, its harsh beauty, its strange capacity for creating home where none had existed. But mostly she thought about Cole, the man who'd offered marriage to a desperate stranger, who'd never lied about his limitations, who'd let her find her place without forcing her into predetermined molds, who'd slowly, carefully, let her matter to him despite the obvious risk. Emma pulled the letter from her pocket, walked to the fireplace, and fed it to the flames. The paper curled and blackened, reducing $1,700 to ash. Cole watched without speaking, but something changed in his expression, a tension releasing, a breath finally exhaled. She didn't love him yet. Emma could admit that honestly. But she cared about him. She respected him. She wanted to see what they could build together with more time, more trust, and more choosing each other deliberately. Cole stood, crossed the room, and took Emma's hands in his rough, scarred ones. No pretty speeches emerged. Instead, he simply pressed his forehead to hers and breathed out words that mattered more than poetry. Thank you for staying. That spring, Emma planted a garden behind the house. Not the practical vegetable garden, but something purely beautiful. Flowers she ordered from Denver, including roses that probably wouldn't survive Wyoming winters, but she'd try anyway. Cole built her a fence and helped dig holes in the still cold earth. Summer brought changes beyond gardens. Emma learned to ride properly, accompanying Cole to check distant pastures. They began making weekly trips to Silver Creek together, becoming familiar faces at the general store and church socials. People stopped asking questions about their sudden marriage. But the most significant change happened gradually. Somewhere between spring planting and summer heat, between shared meals and shared silence, Emma and Cole stopped being two separate people and became something unified. Emma couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. Maybe it was the night Cole let her bandage his injured hand without protest. Maybe it was the morning she woke to find him watching her sleep with unexpected tenderness. Maybe it was the afternoon they worked together breaking a stubborn colt, moving in perfect synchronization without needing words. Or maybe it was simply the accumulation of 1,000 small moments. Coffee poured without asking, chores divided without negotiating, touches that lingered longer than necessary, laughter that came easier. One evening in late August, as they sat on the porch watching sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, Cole spoke words he'd never said before. He loved her, not like he'd loved Catherine. That was something separate, preserved in memory. This was different, unexpected, built slowly from shared days and chosen commitment. But it was real, and he wanted her to know. Emma turned to face him, seeing clearly the man she'd married in desperate haste. The quiet rancher who'd offered salvation without strings. The patient partner who'd let her find herself. The husband who'd become more than an obligation. She kissed him then, slow and deliberate, and spoke her own truth. She loved him too, not because he'd save her from that train platform, not because she lacked better options, but because he'd shown her that the best love wasn't the one you planned. It was the one you built together, day by day, choice by choice, until suddenly you couldn't imagine building anything else. As darkness settled over the Wyoming foothills, Emma and Cole remained on that porch, bodies aligned and hands clasped. What had started as a transaction on an empty platform had become something neither could have predicted, a marriage built on honesty rather than romance, on choices rather than accidents, on proving every day that sometimes the best things in life arrive when plans fall apart. Years later, when people asked how they met, Emma and Cole would exchange glances and smile. The story sounded impossible. A mail-order bride abandoned at a station, a rancher making an impulsive proposal, a marriage born from desperation transformed into devotion. But impossible things happened all the time in the West, where harsh land demanded either breaking or becoming something stronger. They became something stronger. And that was enough. If this story of finding love in unexpected places touched your heart, Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments which moment moved you most. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.